Well, good morning, everybody. I just wanted to start off with a GOES 16 full disk image just to remind everybody that today is the first day of astronomical fall for the Northern Hemisphere, first day of spring in the Southern Hemisphere. The sun's rays today will be for the first time in 6 months at noon. They'll be south of the equator. And the sun set last night on the North Pole and will not rise again for another 6 months. So I get a little bit of a glow on the horizon for the next couple of days. But we're going to continue the pretty rapid loss of daylight hours in the Northern Hemisphere, and they're gaining them pretty quickly in the Southern Hemisphere. What was interesting about this past weekend, though, just with respect to weather patterns, was the total precipitation that came out of the low that left California, moved that direction, the ridge that was over parts of the south and southeast, which helped to spread moisture to fill in this hole with rain. That was something we talked a lot about last week, including some snow in the mountains here in Colorado. Now, when we step back and look at it on the whole, the model forecasts were for a much larger area to get more uniform rainfall. And that just highlights one of the inconsistencies and the troubles with our forecast models. Because the reality is we were overcoming a lot of dry air that was already in place. And where the frontal boundary really finally established itself, we got our heaviest rain in a pretty narrow corridor in through here. And I just bring that up just to make a point about the way that these weather forecasts are going to work. And we commented a lot about that last week, just to say, man, to be able to get this moisture in such a widespread manner, I think the models are kind of overdoing it. They're not accounting for the dry air that's already in place. And as a result, these rainfall totals were disappointing for many of you. We then followed that up with some really cold air that came into Montana. We had frost advisories over the weekend in the western side of the Dakotas. And this morning, we're still watching the upper Midwest for the risk of frost. Now, those would not be untimely frosts. Late September frosts are common in those three areas, but I just wanted to point that out as well. But back to the moisture side of this, as you can see, much of the west, much of the northern plains, the south, most of the cotton belt down here in the northeast was dry. And if we just take a look back at what this month to date temperature ranks map looks like, we have several locations like this one, including the Chicagoland area, that is having its driest September on record. There's many here. Take a look at the western corn belt from Nebraska, getting into Iowa, Minnesota, and South Dakota. And remember, this was the area back in spring that had an absolute deluge of rain. Many of these same climate reporting districts from spring all the way through midsummer were having their wettest on record. The Northeast remains quite dry. Francine's moisture is being accounted for here. The multiple systems that rolled through the Northwest hitting this part of Montana after coming through Oregon and Idaho reflected pretty well on this. And we can see, even though it's not much, but that moisture that did come through here helped to revive that part of the southern plains and the western plains of the United States down here in Texas, Oklahoma, and New Mexico. Okay. The bigger issue with all of this just comes back to several of the things we've been watching. The first of which is our soil moisture problems. Again, I'm mostly concerned about the fact that seeing such low soil moisture going into fall, especially given the drier overall fall forecast, despite some tropical systems, several of these areas can't get tropical moisture that are pretty far to the north. And as a result, I'm worried about carrying these deficits deep into winter and having to rely heavily on spring rains. But that's your 40 centimeter soil moisture map, and here's your 100 centimeter soil moisture map. So that's down about 40 inches now. And these deficits, I would even call into question, do we really actually make an improvement in this area at 40 inches with the rainfall that came in over the weekend? It may just be a bit of a modeling thing that we just need to understand. It could be biased a bit because of the way the model incorporates the recent precipitation. Since I'm here, I do want to show you the Mississippi water levels. Let's grab a quick look at that. And here we go. There we are. We are now back down to almost 10 feet below low stage, exactly where we were a year ago. Now, the Mississippi has something coming to it. It does. And that could possibly prevent us from going in this direction. And it's coming in the form of a tropical system. I just want to give you 5 quick maps. We've got the European. We have the European Artificial Intelligence. We have the European Ensemble. I've got the GFS, and then I have the GFS Ensemble. Just 5 quick 7-day forecast anomaly maps. And remember, last week, we started talking last Monday about the potential for something this week coming out of the Central American gyre. That'd be the Western Caribbean. And we're getting better and better evidence of where this system might form, maybe its potential strength, where it could make landfall, possibly between Mississippi and the Florida Panhandle. And because of its timing with a trough, which honestly wouldn't be able to make much precipitation by itself, but the timing of a trough dipping through here late this week could help pull this moisture and wrap it back around, again, hitting parts of the MidSouth, getting into the eastern Corn Belt, hitting the southeast with some potentially very heavy rainfall. I just wanted you to kind of see 5 different forecasts of this before we dive into it. Let me see if we got an update here. This is the 1:44 a.m. forecast update. They've now upped this to a 90% chance of development. And I'm just going to let you know that over the next few days, we're going to hear a lot of hype about this system, and we got to keep a calm head about what it could possibly do. So the reason for that is, it's a system that's going to get into the Gulf and target the southeast, and it could do so and become strong. But we do not yet have the details on that. I'm going to show you what we do know. So again, we're still watching the thunderstorms develop here, and the forecast model spread looks something like this. So depending on how it goes past the Yucatan and Cuba, if it goes right through the strait, that's really important because that would mean it would have limited interaction with land, and as a consequence have better potential for getting stronger. As it gets into the Gulf of Mexico, it'll be a play with wind shear, but it'll also be just the use of the very warm ocean temperatures in this area to continue to strengthen. As it stands, we have something on the evening of the 26th looks to be where this system could be, or afternoon evening of the 26th, approaching land. But I just want you to understand that the forecast spread is very large as to where this could be, and it is still 3-4 days away from us. 3 days away from us, trying to figure out where this is going to be. But as it looks in the models, there you go. You notice at the very end, the forecasts are kind of turning this around a bit. And I want to talk to you in a few moments about what's going on with this upper level trough that's coming in from this direction that could make that happen. Let's look at a couple other ways. How about the forecast intensity? Now, this is from several different models. You can see them labeled over here. And we have right now the forecast spread on its intensity, everything from a tropical storm to a Cat 4 hurricane. So this is where a lot of the hype and misunderstanding is going to come from. In that, how strong this could be is going to be a challenging thing to figure out. I will say it does have the potential, given the ocean temperatures, to get here. But there are multiple environmental factors, including the wind shear, the symmetry of the system, where the dry air is getting pulled in, its interaction with other systems that could limit its upper end strength. But the ocean temperatures are there and enough to support over the next 72 hours, so 3 days from now, for it to intensify to become a major hurricane, which is Category 3 or stronger. If we just look, though, I wanted to show you kind of the model spread. I know it's a quick animation, but there's also other stuff going on here. You can watch the tropical system coming off of Africa that's curling around the Bermuda High, which is still very much on a kind of very far eastward displacement. It's sitting here. And so this potential tropical system here that's going to be developing very quickly over the next 3 days, getting toward this area. But just take note again of the possible spread on where this is going to go. Now let's get a little bit more information on why the turn, what's going on there with that turn once it gets over parts of the Mid-South. And what's happening here, if we look at the artificial intelligence forecast, which again was the first model to pick up on this, is you see this large ridge coming back into the central U.S. And over the top of it, we've developed a trough. So remember, this has cyclonic flow, which is counterclockwise here. And this is the tropical system moving its way north. So extratropical systems are substantially larger than hurricanes. I just want to make that very clear. This trough, which normally we wouldn't even really be talking too much about, it's not that big of a feature, but it's way bigger than this hurricane is going to be. And what's happening is it's kind of pulling in that system. Now, what will be critical to watch is the position of this low. So here we are on Thursday at 7 a.m. in the forecast model, and the flow around this trough is going to be something like this. So what will be important to watch will be the interaction between these two lows. And will this one get pulled out ahead of it such that we dip the one on the back side farther to the south, meaning they're going to try to orbit around one another initially. And you can see the artificial intelligence models doing that. Can you notice that? And that is what is going to happen if the upper level trough dips. The tropical system gets pulled around its circulation, and that's what could deliver more and more rainfall back toward Missouri and Arkansas and southern Illinois. Now at that point, watch it right here, we have a pretty deep low over Tennessee. And the forecast models slowly move it over the eastern Corn Belt. That would be by next Sunday. Okay, so this is an event that looks like it's going to be onshore sometime on Wednesday night, Thursday morning. And it then orbits the upper level low and then lingers over the eastern Corn Belt. Now after this, let's let that system get out. Another large ridge forms right up the western plains. And then we see a deeper trough that begins to form somewhere over the Great Lakes, which we talked about last week, the beginning of October. And if we can dig a deep trough here and keep this pattern as highly amplified as the models are suggesting, this is going to be another one where I'm going to be concerned about dropping in some cold air about 10 days from now on the back side of this. I also want you to look at this particular map, because in a few moments, this map about 10 days from now is very, very much like an MJO phase 1 look, which we thought the beginning of October might start with. So let's leave it at that, and let's get into some of the model forecasts here. First, we're going to begin with NOAA's all hazards weather map at about 5:45 a.m. Frost advisory this morning for parts of Minnesota and northern Wisconsin. We're still dealing with some of the flooding issues here in along parts of Virginia, Maryland, Delaware, and New Jersey's coastline. If we take a look at the high-resolution NAM model, let's get an update on that real quick. There we go. This is how things are playing out throughout the day today. So you notice that frontal boundary is still lingering here. So from this part of Texas into Oklahoma, parts of Arkansas, Missouri, Illinois, we're getting another push of rainfall that's going to try to sneak through. There's also another front, relatively weak, moving through the Red River Valley of the North. This one's coming through by tonight, and we see the scattered rain in parts of the Northeast. Well, watch that front kind of push through and clear this out ahead of it through tomorrow morning. And then at that point, you're going to see a couple of things. A larger front comes into the west, associated with a much deeper low. Here's the northern edge of what could be our next named tropical system. And what's not seen on this is the low that's trying to make its way into this direction to kind of meet up with everything. But that's a quick look through Wednesday midday at our precipitation as forecast by the high-resolution NAM model. From there, let's go out and look at a multi-model analysis just for the next 7 days. This is the WPC. This is the 12Z forecast for the WPC looking out over the next 7 days. And again, this is the model last week that it tends to have a much larger blend on where the precip is. So we do note that there's the potential in here for some extremely heavy rainfall at landfall. We're going to see interactions with the Ozarks and with the Appalachian Mountains. So locally much more heavier in those areas. But the potential to spread quite a bit of rain pretty far north. Now remember, coming out of Oklahoma and Missouri into Illinois and Indiana, southern Indiana, we have the first push of moisture that's happening right now today. If we look out there, this would be the national blend of models. So again, these models, all these maps are in the same projection, so you can kind of compare them more easily. So again, this is the NBM. This is the latest from the artificial intelligence. This is the GFS. So much wider spread moisture. And again, I am working on modifying a lot of this code to get these yellow numbers in here. I think a lot of you find that better, but we'll get that done sooner or later. This is the GFS ensemble. So in other words, we're looking at a 31-member ensemble blend when you look at this. Heaviest rain down here in the Florida Panhandle. This would be the HRES, the high-resolution European model, and its forecast. And then this would be the European ensemble. So again, the idea here was just to look at several different forecast models and put them all together into a suite of maps. So that's going to be the mainstay of this next 7 days of precip. And then it's after that that the deeper troughs develop off the coast, like the one that you'll see here and the one that could come through the Great Lakes. So for most of the next 7 days, if you're not being influenced by the current system moving out of Texas into Oklahoma, Missouri, Arkansas, Illinois, or the lighter rain showers that are in the Northeast, there's not a whole lot else going on until this tropical system gets here, and it's quite dry throughout other regions. But if we look at some precipitation probability numbers over the next 10 days, this is the chance at getting an inch. This is the chance at getting 2 inches. Here's the chance at getting 4. So right now, the European ensemble is very aggressive on the rainfall totals out of this system coming into the southeast, interacting again with some of our elevation like we have coming through parts of Tennessee and out of northern Alabama and Georgia, and also here along the Appalachian Mountains and the Ozarks. So this is just important to understand that while we don't often think of these mountains like we do with the big mountains in the west, they do have an influence on the precipitation. If we go really aggressive and look at who's got the best chance of being extremely wet, our flooding threat in these areas could be quite high. We'll need to monitor that. This is the chance of getting over 8 inches. Let's now take it on the drier side. Who's going to stay under a ½ inch over the next 7 days? That's most of the western half of the United States and the Canadian prairie. And if you look even at the really dry folks under 1/10 of an inch, we can now see that really from about the 100th meridian west, outside of where that trough tries to come into the northwest, we're very dry for this time period. Okay. From there, I want to go show you one other factor, and this will be something we'll keep an eye on all week. And again, you can get this at Ag Weather. I just wanted to get an idea about what the European model's wind field was. So we just kind of played that forward here through the next 7 days. Let's open this up in a new tab real quick. And I wanted to zoom in there in the southeast just to see what the model's saying. Now, this is just the European model, but it's got the strongest winds coming into Florida and Georgia out of this system. Again, this is one single simulation, so it's taking the eye of this thing right here over this part of over Florida. So we need to watch this very carefully as it moves in. From there, let's get a good look at week 2. By the way, we redesigned the site a bit over the weekend just to kind of continue to improve performance. I hope you like it. It looks something like this when you land on it. Now we've got a couple of different ways to look at things, a little more interactivity, but everything over here is still the same, just hopefully a little bit nicer to look at. So I clicked on the day 8 through 14 precip anoms, and what you notice is that when we get past this tropical system, we dig a low here and a low there. So the pattern gets really amplified. And as a result, we've got wetter conditions. There could be another tropical push over Florida. We've got to watch that. That's in the artificial intelligence model. But overall, we keep parts of the southeast wet. This will be where the leftovers of this tropical system linger a little bit. But on the backside of it, things are relatively dry. And we just saw that, of course, in the other forecast models as well. So from here, let's start to just take this out and look at temperatures. So the 7-day frost forecast, again, high elevation here, patchy frost being forecast here in Minnesota and Wisconsin. And if we look at the high temperatures today, getting into Tuesday and Wednesday. So again, on Tuesday, you can see just cloud cover dominated. A lot of heat in the west coming back temporarily. There's Wednesday into Thursday. Now Thursday will be when we see the tropical system making its way into the southeast. So again, cloud cover cooling things off here. Very hot in parts of the western Dakotas, eastern Montana, and Wyoming. Remember, we had frost advisories out for this area over the weekend. Then we get into Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And so it'll be a week of watching where that tropical system goes, where its cloud cover and rainfall is going to go, while we wait for the rest of the atmosphere to start to get into this deep low off the coast, some sort of low moving in through here and another ridge that builds in the middle part of the country. So that's why when you look out there, the next 5 days, which are shown here, day 5 through 10 shown here, we start to see a bit of a transition in the pattern moving forward. And what I'm concerned about is, as you saw earlier, about 10 days from now, there's going to be a trough that dips into the Great Lakes. And remember, on our site, you can go look at the actual temperature forecasts. Since it was the artificial intelligence model that was picking up on that frost risk, I'm going to show it to you here. Now, where are we going in this forecast? We're all the way to Saturday to Sunday. Early next week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Now, remember, it'll be by Wednesday that we're done with the tropical system. We're watching a low build here and this trough that's digging into the Great Lakes. So watch the morning temperatures. This is next Wednesday, already in the 30s here according to the artificial intelligence. This is next Thursday morning, October the 3rd. Remember, we were worried about the beginning of October having a shot at cold air coming through here. And then this is going to be, there we go, that would be Friday, October the 4th. So as it stands, and we're just going to take the model at its face value here, this is 276 hours from now. But we're looking for consistency. And we do see that there could be a frost event that comes into this area in that first week of October. Now, what's interesting about this is that we expect October to be a transition month and not just get stuck all warm or stuck all cold. It just tends to be one of volatility. That's all Octobers tend to be that way. Honestly, it's pretty rare that one just gets hot and stays hot or gets cold and stays cold. So as you look out there at the new week 3, week 4 forecast, which is the 5th of October to the 18th of October, and you just see a lot of mild forecast here, remember that there's going to be a lot of variability in this. Okay, so this is just, they're trying to average 14 days together and try to give us an idea that we may favor more mild conditions, but we can punctuate mild weather with brief drops in colder weather, which is what you just saw, right? You just saw that in the AIFS forecast. Their overall dryness from Texas into the Midwest, stretching back into the mountains, this makes a lot of sense given the fact that we are not seeing a really aggressive early start to the subtropical the subtropical jet stream, or a really aggressive deep diving jet stream coming across the United States. And there's already very dry air that's in place in much of this region, so it kind of makes sense. The CFSV2 forecast model, let's look out there at the week 3, week 4 precip. I mean, it's very dry in the interior as well. What is not being captured by these models is, where's the next tropical system that could come through? That's going to be difficult to figure out. Take note of how the new forecast for the 2nd and 3rd weeks of October tends to shift more of the heat west. That does mimic, kind of what the National Weather Service has been saying. But it's just a reminder that when we look at these forecasts, especially the European model, which still looks like this for the month of October, it is unable to capture those short duration cold snaps or tropical systems. It's just looking here. It's a lower resolution run. We're averaging together 30 full days. And so what it is saying is simply this. Without another tropical system coming through here, this whole region is drier. We don't have the right flow set up for this. It's mainly anchoring itself off of British Columbia, right? We talked about that last week. This is all still influenced by the West Pacific Oscillation, just driving systems here. So we don't have the right setup to bring in lots and lots of moisture unless we get a tropical system, which is what we just saw. And we cannot predict those tropical systems more than about 10 days out. I mean, that was my limit on the previous one, right? When I first talked to you about it last Monday, it was speculative, like, hey, the Caribbean gyre, it's the right time of year. We just need to know that, even though no model was showing it, that it can happen. And then we built that narrative throughout the week. So I just want to be clear on what we can and cannot do here. This is the longer range outlook, though, for October, based off of the European and its temperature forecast, which is just going to look mild. And we just have to remember that mild look isn't going to be fully representative of the variations you're going to get throughout the weeks. And we already looked at the next 2 weeks. I'm just saying through the remainder of October, there'll be plenty of times where there's chances for cold air to come into the U.S. It's just not a setup to keep it cold and leave it cold. Does that make sense? I just want to make sure I'm being clear here. Elsewhere around the world, we are still being dominated by a few things. The cold water here is representative of where that deeper trough has lived. And that's a part of that positive West Pacific Oscillation. It's being helped by the ridge to the south over this warm water. We've seen a lot of cool water just off the coast as of late here, but your eye is probably drawn to what's going on with La Nina. So thinking about La Nina, right now the ocean temperatures are a full degree Celsius below average. The Southern Oscillation Index, though, backed off. It dropped back towards zero recently, which means the trade winds aren't just fully committed to staying strong, and they're going to do that. Every single La Nina event, they come on, they back off. They come on, they back off, and that's what we expect to have happen. But at some point, this will become a more dominant part of our forecast picture. And when it does, it'll be critical to understand. But when it backed off right now, it sent the MJO back here over to Western Africa. Africa in the Western Hemisphere, which is phase 1. And so, I don't know if you remember, but several minutes ago I said, doesn't that seem to kind of remind you of what I talked about last week with the MJO, where we have troughs digging here and troughs over the Great Lake? That's what we saw in the forecast 10 days from now, when the MJO is expected to be getting toward phase 1 with ridging in the southwest. So this tends to hit British Columbia hard. We tend to get drier air on the backside of this, a bit more activity in the southeast and up the east coast. In fact, man, if you're an East Coast snow lover, you'd want a pattern like this all winter long. Big ridges to the north, deep troughs that come over the Great Lakes, nice ridge sitting off the coast to push things back in. This would be a snow lover's dream in the east, up the East Coast and into the interior of the Northeast. But it's not that time yet. We're still in late September. So thinking all of that through, let's come back to the 1 month update here. This is the forecast put out for the month of October by the Climate Prediction Center. Last week we walked through all the models, the longer range again, and we'll keep building these long range ideas throughout this week. But their forecast really reflects that MJO phase 1 look. Now I said, well, this would be a big time snow lover. Well, we're not there yet. So you're going, wait, it's still mild. Yeah, that ridge is going to keep things mild. Where the chances of cooler air are going to be coming in here. That's also where some drier air is going to be. Plus, we already have the drier air that's in place. So I still think that was some of the big reasoning behind the CPC's new update for the month of October. So from here, I just want to finish up with a bit on South America. Let's go have a look at yesterday's satellite data. Very dry in the interior of Brazil, a lot of wildfire smoke. If you want to just take a quick look at how much they've planted in Mato Grosso, this is only for Mato Grosso, they're at 0.27%. Last year we were at 1.82. This isn't the time of year that it makes a lot of difference. It's October. So if you notice at the beginning of October, we should be about 8, 9, 10% planted. And by the end of October, we're at about 80% planted, maybe even 90. So we have questions as to whether or not we're going to stay on this 5-year average or if we're going to be above or below. Now, where the models have been trending, right? We've been talking a lot about that. And so let's get in and just have a discussion about what's going on there. First of all, using the CMORPH data set, it has been quite wet in southern Brazil, parts of Uruguay, and also into parts of Paraguay and maybe parts of the Paraná River Valley here. Just over the last 30 days, this is the 30-day rainfall total, which in some places here, as you can see in the color progression, are over 4 to 5 inches of rain. So a lot of flooding in southern Brazil, but no early start to the monsoon. And the state I just showed you the planting progress for is this one, if you're unfamiliar. So that's why they're not planting just yet. We look for ingredients, right? And so I'm going to show you precipitable water. This is how much moisture is in the atmosphere to be available for precipitation. And so one of the reasons why this system coming out of the Caribbean has potential is because these warm colors represent above average precipitable water. There's plenty of juice to work with. Take a look at the dryness that we looked at the very beginning, stretching from the plains all the way to the northeast. It's shown up pretty clearly there. But this is what we're trying to overcome. That blue is on the low side of this spectrum, which means there's too much dry air that's in place. I think there's plenty of moisture to be drawn from here once the winds start to bring this through and get it over the Amazon. But remember, the atmosphere steals what it needs first before you get the excess, which is rain. So we got to wait to overcome this. And we've been questioning, right? We keep showing these 30-day forecasts for the month of October. And what it now looks like is that drier air is having a bigger influence. And we watched several model runs that just showed up with wetter and wetter conditions. And now we're backing things off to near average across Brazil's main growing area with a drier signal in the northeast. Very wet in southern Brazil, it's going to be a problem. But this area through here, we saw multiple forecasts day after day after day that were wet. And now the new European models backed off a bit more toward average in most places with a little bit of drier signal. For example, Mato Grosso do Sul, Goiás, Tocantins, Minas Gerais, I don't know how to say it. I need to call my Brazilian friends and have them just write it down for me. But we're keeping an eye on this is the main story here, all right? So do I think there's going to be rapid early planting in October? No. Do I think that the second half of October could have a better chance at rain? Yeah. And that's what'll matter. Can they get it all in by the time we get to the end of October, beginning of November? But certainly right now, off pace. But it's the early time period for this. So not yet. This is like us talking about our early April planting progress in the United States for corn and soybeans. So I'll stop there. Tell you all to have a good week. I'll talk to you again tomorrow morning. Thanks.